In this lesson, we are going to be walking through when to use VLANs in your network install, as well as how to configure VLANs on the X-Series switch user interface. Our X-Series switch models are the following listed, and this lesson applies for all of these particular models that have been updated to the 3.4.4 firmware version. Now, before we begin, we want to log into the default IP address of 192.168.1.205. Your username is admin, and the password is blank. And you may have to enter it in more than once. So first, let's figure out when should VLANs be used on a network installation. Typically, for a larger network install, using VLANs would be highly recommended for segmenting the network traffic and to remove the likelihood of having any latency issues for those latency-sensitive devices. Now, examples of these latency-sensitive devices, you might have VoIP phones. If they're not given the necessary priority on the network, then your client may end up with crackling noises or on the other end of the phone. During audio and/or video streaming, you want to try and keep these devices from continuously buffering, which also may require having them configured for a different VLAN. Now, things that will not require any sort of networking priority are devices such as computers and printers. Therefore, if there is an installation that is going to only have computers, let's say a printer and an IP camera, then VLANs will not be necessary, and having a flat network, which is just a single VLAN network, will be just fine. We're going to start walking through how to add additional VLANs onto the X-Series user interface. When we first log into the interface, we want to navigate to VLAN and then VLAN configuration. Now, when the page first displays, you will immediately be able to view the VLANs that are pre-configured on the switch. In this case, there's currently only VLAN 1, but I know I will need to add VLANs 2, 3, and 6 because I will be configuring these VLANs on my network. On this page, we're able to add these additional VLANs by simply typing the VLAN ID number in the box provided and click Apply. Once you've completed adding these 3 VLANs, we are now able to begin configuring the ports on the switch. Now, the following are the ports and how I need them to be configured for my network. Port 1 is going to be my uplink port from the router. Port 24 is going to be my access point that will have multiple SSIDs tagged with different VLANs, including VLAN 6 for my guest network SSID. Ports 3 through 5 will need to be configured for VLAN 2, since this is where my IP cameras will be connected, and ports 7 through 10 will be configured for VLAN 3, since this is going to be my control system network devices. Please keep in mind that the only devices that are able to be configured across multiple VLANs but still communicate to one another are those that send out unicast and/or multicast messaging. If a device communicates using broadcast messaging, then it will not have the capability of communicating across VLANs. If this happens, then please be sure to have your hardwired computer or wireless laptop connected on the same VLAN as that device in order to properly communicate to it. Now next, as I'm configuring my ports on my switch for my devices, I need to make sure I know when to set it up as an access port versus setting it up as a hybrid port. Now, the only devices that will be configured as hybrid ports are those that have a user interface capable of configuring VLANs, which are primarily routers, switches, and access points. All other end-user devices, such as printers, computers, control systems, home automation devices, they will be configured only as access ports. The reason is because these devices are not capable of configuring VLANs on their user interfaces. Therefore, they do not need to have any VLANs tagged, but only to be configured for the VLAN which the device will be set. This VLAN is called their default VLAN. Something else to keep in mind when configuring your end-user devices to be set on a specific VLAN, you also need to make sure that their gateway is configured for the VLAN gateway. For example, for my ports being configured on VLAN 2, I need to place a 192.168.2.1 gateway to match the VLAN 2 gateway configured on my router. For VLAN 3, I need to place a 192.168.3.1 gateway to match the VLAN 3 gateway on my router once again. If this information is configured incorrectly on the end-user device, the devices will no longer be able to communicate across VLANs as they should be. Also, if the default VLAN is not properly configured on the port, then the device will not be detected on the network as well. So first we're going to configure our hybrid ports, which are ports 1 and 24. We will navigate to hybrid port and select one of the port numbers which we are trying to configure, then select our default VLAN 1 since the IP address for our router is on VLAN 1 at 192.168.1.99, and we're going to tag the remaining VLANs. By doing so, this will allow the additional VLAN traffic to communicate on this port back to the router. We will then do the exact same configuration for port 24. Now that we've configured both of our hybrid ports, ports 1 and 24, we are now going to configure our access ports from the access port menu option. To reiterate, ports 3 through 5 will need to be configured for VLAN 2, and ports 7 through 10 are going to be configured for VLAN 3 for the control system. We're going to go ahead and first configure ports 3 and 4. So we'll select port 3, and it's going to be default VLAN 2 and apply. And then we will apply the same thing for port 4. We'll select default VLAN 2 and apply. Now to configure a couple of the VLAN 3 ports, we're going to click on port 7. We're going to place a check in the VLAN 3 box, and we'll click on apply. And we're going to configure the exact same VLAN for port 8. Now to give us an idea of what our configuration looks like, we will navigate back to VLAN configuration, and now you can view which VLANs are set as default VLANs for specific ports and their devices, as well as which are hybrid ports for the VLAN aware devices. So you'll notice VLAN ID 1 has all the ports that were not configured for any other default VLAN. So if you look at our ports that we were supposed to configure, we had hybrid ports 1 and 24. You will notice if you go to ports 1 and 24, their default VLAN is 1, and they have all other VLANs tagged under the T row. And if you look at ports 3 and 4, you'll notice untagged, which means default VLAN is VLAN 2. And you'll notice for untagged ports 7 and 8, their default VLAN is VLAN 3. Every other port on this switch is configured for default VLAN 1 because there is no additional configuration applied. Thank you for your time on walking through when to use VLANs on your network and how to configure the VLANs on your X series switch.